Coming out, I spent this morning at a Remembrance Day service over in Richmond, where the president of the RSL said that Richmond was the municipality that sent the most number of troops off in the First World War, many of whom paid the ultimate price. And it's a pretty moving feeling when everything in the city drops to silence as we all pause to remember the sacrifice that people have made. And on behalf of the Greens, I want to extend our thanks and remembrances to everyone who has served, and especially those who did pay the ultimate price. And it's because the price that so many men and women pay is potentially so high that it's our responsibility as politicians to think very deeply and very carefully before we make the decision to deploy forces overseas. It is not at all clear how sending Australian troops further into Iraq will make country here in Australia safer. In fact, there's every chance that further Australian military deployment will do the opposite. The Greens fully support our troops who have been deployed, but we just don't believe that the decision to deploy them, made by politicians, will make this country safer. Yes, the Greens would prefer to see our troops here at home. On another matter, there are reports that Joe Hockey is not going to be able to balance the budget if he persists with his unfair measures. The only way that Joe Hockey is going to be able to balance the budget is if he takes his hand out of the pockets of everyday Australians and starts asking big business here and internationally to pay their fair share. Why should people have to pay more to go and see the doctor while the likes of Gina Rinehart are getting off scot-free? There's a way to balance the budget fairly that Joe Hockey could get through Parliament tomorrow, and that involves him standing up to some of the wealthiest companies here and around the globe and asking them to pay a bit more. Australian banks, for example, are making world-leading profits, and that's in part off the back of support from the taxpayer. By asking them to pay their fair share of tax, we'll have another $13 billion. By asking the likes of Gina Rinehart to pay the same for her fuel in her mining companies as the rest of the country pays for its petrol, we could raise an extra couple of $1 billion a year. And if you ask most people, how would you rather Joe Hockey balance the budget? Would you rather Gina Rinehart and the big banks pay a little bit more? Or do you think it's fair that people should have to pay more to go and see the doctor and we rip $80 billion out of hospitals and schools? I know what most people would say. So this is a wake-up call for Joe Hockey and Tony Abbott. It's time to ditch the budget that hits the young and the old and the sick and the poor. Go back to the drawing board and do what the people of Australia want. Ask big business to pay their fair share instead of taking the axe to everyone else.
Going back to the first issue, how can this be mission creep if it's the same mission, just different numbers?
Well, from day one, we were told that this was a humanitarian mission and that the involvement there would be about ensuring that people who are in immediate danger would find a path to safety. Then it becomes about airstrikes. Now it's about having troops on the ground, and we're told that they're not going to be involved in combat operations directly, but if the mission creep over the last few weeks and months is anything to go by, that is well and truly on the table. And indeed, we've heard reports that the United States is now asking us to get further involved. When all of these decisions are made without a full parliamentary debate, that's how Australia gets dragged into wars, and gets dragged into wars that can last for years, if not decades, that don't ultimately make Australia safer.
Where do you think this trend of enlargement will end?
Well, we don't know where this current mission creep will end. There should be a full debate in the Australian Parliament about exactly what our role here should be. And the crucial question that needs to be asked is, will getting Australian troops further involved in Iraq and potentially in Syria as well make this country safer? At the moment, the Prime Minister has not been able to make a convincing case that getting Australia involved in another war will make Australia safer, and we fear the opposite will be the case.
Australia said it would back the United States from the beginning. Isn't it reasonable and in keeping with that for these announcements to come now?
Australia needs to make a decision about what's in our national interest, not about what's the United States' national interest. Australia has in the past blindly followed the United States into wars before, and it hasn't always been in the Australian interest. We should be making a decision independently about whether we should be involved in this war. And at the moment, this is not our war, and Australia should not be there. Thanks very much.